We weren't anything important to them at all. We weren't even a human being to them. We were just another toy to be passed around. And that's what they did.
Jeffrey Epstein's name has come to be associated with controversy, wrongdoing, and horrible acts in recent years. He was found guilty of 2 crimes, but following the latest developments in his case, there is a resurgence of interest in discovering the sinister truths about this mysterious man and the horrible fate of his victims. But what became of Epstein's victims? How did these young ladies become caught in his web of cruelty? And who were they? Virginia J., one of Epstein's victims, was born in Virginia Louise Roberts. She had to deal with an unstable family life. She had left home at a young age, taking sanctuary on the merciless streets where malnutrition and further had become her daily companions. But destiny had other ideas for Virginia. When she was 14 years old, she went back to live with her father and started working at Donald Trump's opulent property, Mar-a-Lago. Virginia would meet Jeffrey Epstein when she was staying at Mar-a-Lago, and this encounter would forever alter her life. Epstein showed a great deal of interest in Virginia because he saw potential for in her susceptibility to under the pretense of giving her a better life. He enticed her into his complex network of deceit and deception. After Virginia met Epstein, she was introduced to an incredible world of power and luxury. She got to know him and Ghislaine Maxwell, his partner, rather well. Virginia found herself commuting back and forth between Epstein's lavish homes in Manhattan and Palm Beach, his expansive New Mexico ranch, and his infamous private island between 2000 and 2002. At this time, Epstein and his influential allies subjected Virginia and other victims to unspeakable cruelty and exploitation. It is certain that Epstein's victims suffered immensely while under his control, although the full depth of the atrocities they experienced is yet unknown. We must seek justice for them and bring light to their experiences. When Virginia was sold to Epstein's influential circle of politicians, merchants, and even members of the royal family, she went through unspeakable events. The opulent way of life and the private planes concealed the grim truth of her role as a player in Epstein's deranged scheme. With the intention of escaping her painful background, Virginia bravely chose to escape Epstein and Maxwell's control in 2002 and relocate to Australia with her spouse. But her experiences had left wounds, and she knew she had to fight for what was right. Virginia filed a defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell, a longtime acquaintance of Epstein, in 2015. This was her first judicial struggle. She said that Maxwell had made disparaging remarks about her, which had made the trauma she had already experienced worse. Although the lawsuit was resolved under seal in 2017, it was the catalyst for Virginia's unwavering quest for justice. In 2019, Alan Dershowitz, a well-known attorney who had served on Epstein's legal counsel, was sued for defamation by Virginia. She said he was fabricating things to hurt her reputation and shield Epstein. Virginia was unhappy but unfazed when the lawsuit was dropped in 2022. In 2021, Virginia filed one of the most well-known cases against Prince Andrew. In an effort to get justice for the she suffered as a child, she launched a civil action. The lawsuit was permitted to move forward in 2022, but in February of that year, an out-of-court settlement was reached before it could go to trial. The settlement's specifics are kept under wraps. The media paid close attention to Virginia's claims during her court cases. In interviews and movies, she openly discussed her experiences with Epstein and his friends trafficking. Her bravery pushed others to share their own accounts, illuminating the scope of Epstein's maltreatment and the influential parties involved. Beyond the courtroom, Virginia's advocacy efforts had a lasting influence on bringing attention to the problem of human trafficking and advancing survivors' rights. She founded nonprofit groups including Speak Out, Act Reclaim, and Victims Refuse Silence, which are committed to helping trafficking survivors and spreading awareness of the problem. Her unwavering efforts have been essential in exposing the murky side of trafficking and holding those involved accountable. One name sticks out among the innumerable survivors who have come forward: Johanna Scherberg. Johanna attracted the attention of Maxwell, who saw in her the ideal object of Epstein's depraved fantasies when she was a college student. Maxwell approached Johanna under the pretense of giving her the chance of a lifetime, promising her a job working for Epstein and an opportunity to join his inner circle. Johanna accepted the invitation because she was intrigued and didn't know what horrors lay ahead for her. She thought it would be a great opportunity to network and get important experience in the realm of high society. She had no idea that she was entering a nightmare. Johanna soon discovered that things were not as they appeared when she started working with Epstein. Emmy Taylor, who would later train her in massage techniques, was shown to her. But these weren't your typical massages. These massages were precursors to far darker and more menacing deeds. Johanna received training from Maxwell and Taylor that went much beyond what was expected of a professional, all in an effort to appease Epstein. During these so-called massages, she was taught how to make him a chore that made her feel dehumanized and but it wasn't the end of the horror. While staying at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, Johanna was also at the heart of an unsettling episode involving Prince Andrew. She experienced the unimaginable. That was a moment Johanna will never forget. Her testimony turned into one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case against Maxwell and Epstein. The gory details Johanna gave of the massages, the pressure to please Epstein, and the unsettling event involving Prince Andrew gave readers a terrifying look into the shadowy world of the affluent and powerful. Johanna's tale went viral once her deposition was made public. The depth of Epstein's depravity and the cooperation of those around him horrified and outraged many. After the tale gained traction in the media, Johanna's name came to represent the struggle for justice. But Johanna's path to justice was not an easy one. She was scrutinized, questioned, and even victimized. While some attempted to undermine her testimony, others questioned her motivations. Johanna didn't waver in her quest for justice and the truth, though. Knowing that she wasn't the only survivor, her courage encouraged more survivors to speak up. In order to hold Epstein and Maxwell accountable and stop more harm to others, they banded together and presented a unified front. In the following section, we will look into the untold stories of Doe 107, one of the people who claims to be a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. But let's first go over the history and setting of this well-known case before we get into her tale. Wealthy banker and convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein rose to fame in the early 2000s because of his relationships with powerful people in the entertainment, economic, and political spheres. Epstein had a dark secret while leading a lavish lifestyle and being a part of a powerful circle. Federal accusations concerning child trafficking and conspiracy to participate in child trafficking were brought against him in 2008. Shocking information concerning a large network of who were drawn into his predatory web was made public throughout the trial. Epstein's criminal activities encompassed his opulent homes in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and his own island in the Caribbean called Little St. James, where he is said to have carried out his most egregious deeds. Epstein's links to prominent figures, including politicians, businessmen, and even members of the British royal family, added a further layer of intrigue to the case. The scope of his network and the potential involvement of these people shook society. Epstein was detained once more in 2019 on suspicion of federal trafficking. However, he was discovered dead in his Manhattan jail cell less than a month after his arrest, and it was determined that he had to kill himself. This prevented his victims from getting justice and left a lot of unresolved concerns. Doe 107, a claimed victim of the Epstein case, came forward amid the tumult and media frenzy surrounding it. Doe 107's lawyer made a motion to Manhattan federal judge Loretta Preska on a momentous day, asking the court to preserve her anonymity. According to the lawyer, Doe 107 lived in a nation outside of the U.S. with a conservative culture and was afraid of what would happen if her name was made public. The plea was made even more urgent when the lawyer emphasized that Doe 107 was in actual danger of physical injury. The case's judge, Loretta Preska, recognized the gravity of the issue and asked Doe 107 to provide an affidavit substantiating her allegations of being in danger and receiving hate mail. Nevertheless, Doe 107 missed the deadline, which put her case in jeopardy. Social media users were left wondering about Doe 107's identity and her relationship to Epstein as word of her plea circulated. There was even conjecture that the complete Epstein list wouldn't be made public until January 22nd, which increased the curiosity over who Doe 107 was. After Doe 107 neglected to provide the required affidavit by the deadline, the case took an intricate turn. She reportedly switched counsel later on, which raises even more questions about who she is and what her goals are. On social media, meanwhile, speculations and ideas regarding the genuine identity of Doe 107 abounded, with many even asserting to have intimate knowledge. curiosity and a burning desire to know the truth surged throughout the populace. At the age of 14, Carolyn Andriana began experiencing in 2001. She told her tale. Carolyn's life was irrevocably altered, and her innocence was broken in Epstein's Palm Beach mansion, a house of horrors. Carolyn suffered unimaginably for 4 long years throughout the torture. She could not break free from Epstein's hold. She was caught in a vicious circle of fear and manipulation. But Carolyn's tale did not finish there. Years later, in a trial that attracted international attention, she had the courage to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice. Carolyn described in graphic detail the atrocities she suffered at the hands of Epstein in her testimony. She talked about how she became addicted to and painkillers in an effort to forget the trauma that had been perpetrated upon her. Carolyn faced several challenges on her path, even with her bravery and tenacity. On May 23rd, Carolyn Andriano's life tragically changed when it was found that she had passed away in a West Palm Beach, Florida hotel room. An accidental overdose of methadone, phenyl, and alpraum was found to be the cause of her tragic death. With Carolyn's departure, Epstein's victims suffered yet another heartbreaking loss. Another survivor, Lee Skye Patrick, unfortunately passed away in 2017 after an overdose. Beyond only causing his victims bodily and psychological distress, Epstein's had far-reaching consequences. It took lives, shattering families, and left towns in grief. Unanswered questions and sadness followed Carolyn's passing. She was a daughter, a wife, and a mother of 5. Her family members were left to deal with the sorrow of her passing and the fallout from her untimely death. Carolyn's inheritance became the subject of legal disputes, which only made the pain and suffering worse. Her mother and her 2 eldest children were named beneficiaries in her 2010 will. But once she married John Pitts Jr. and had 3 additional children, things got complicated. These legal problems are still being resolved. The loss of Carolyn is a sobering reminder of Epstein's long-lasting effects. It is evidence of the severe damage he imposed on his victims and the difficulties they endure even after the is stopped. One of Epstein's victims, Lee Skye Patrick, was a young child whose interactions with the scientist would alter her life irrevocably. Like many others, Skye Patrick was introduced to Epstein's world via a mutual acquaintance. She was first taken aback by his attention and the promises of an opulent existence. She had no idea, though, that she was about to enter a nightmare that would follow her for years. As an expert manipulator, Epstein understood just how to take advantage of impressionable young ladies such as Lee Skye Patrick. He used his connections, fortune, and influence to entice people into his web of lies. Once in charge, he them in ways that were beyond comprehension. In their first meetings, Epstein offered Lee Skye Patrick hope for a better life. She was exposed to a world of luxury and got to mingle with the well-known and wealthy. But lurking behind the scenes was a dark reality that waited for her. Epstein's lavish estate served as the setting for Lee Skye Patrick's never-ending nightmare. She was coerced into having against her will, frequently in front of other strong people who shared Epstein's inner circle. She suffered severe psychological trauma that affected her life for a long time. Epstein exerted constant control and manipulation on Lee Skye Patrick. He gave her the impression that there was no way out, and that if she spoke up, no one would take her seriously. She was locked in a cycle of for years, and fear and intimidation kept her mute. Lee Skye Patrick didn't have the guts to speak up about Epstein's misdeeds until years later, when the facts started to come to light. She was aware that she needed to speak up for all the other victims who this predator had harmed in addition to herself. Some questioned and doubted Lee Skye Patrick's courage for speaking up, but she stuck to her convictions and was determined to reveal the sinister truths about Epstein's society. Lee Skye Patrick was physically and psychologically damaged as a result of Epstein's mistreatment of her. She underwent unspeakable psychological anguish and lived in perpetual terror, tormented by recollections of her mistreatment. Her sense of self-worth was destroyed by Epstein's influence over her, and she felt helpless and confined. Lee Skye Patrick went to therapy in an attempt to find comfort and healing, and she started a difficult road to take back her life and piece together her broken identity. But the wounds from her past were deep, and there were many challenges on her path to rehabilitation. Lee Skye Patrick made every attempt to escape Epstein, but she was never able to fully recover, and this negatively affected her relationships, mental health, and general well-being. Sadly, she was unable to handle the burden of her experiences. She was trapped in a vicious cycle of addiction and mental anguish, and she was in excruciating pain. Lee Sky Patrick's fight came to an abrupt end on that terrible day when she overdosed on leaving behind a broken family and a world devoid of her promise. Heartbroken by the loss, Lee Sky Patrick's twin sister is adamant that the torture she endured at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein is the reason behind her terrible death. This tragic result was eventually brought about by the anguish and suffering that Lee Sky Patrick experienced throughout her life. The harrowing recollections of her childhood assault marked the beginning of Rachel Benava's brave and resilient journey. Rachel went through things as a young child that no child should ever have to go through. She did, however, struggle, like many victims, to locate the resources and assistance needed to deal with the trauma. As she grew older, Rachel realized that writing a book was the secret to getting over her difficult background. She struggled with the dread of being judged and the horrible memories that might come back, so she didn't make this decision lightly. But Rachel understood that telling her tale was crucial to save other defenseless kids from going through the same atrocities she experienced. Following Jeffrey Epstein's arrest, Rachel felt compelled to speak up about the she had experienced as a kid and the troubling activities that occurred at Zorro Ranch. Through her writing, Rachel set out on a path of self-discovery and healing, hoping to encourage self-love and awareness in addition to mending herself. Rachel has had eerie encounters along the way, including terrible dreams that interfere with her day-to-day activities and have a lasting effect. She is taken to a calm courtyard with French doors, fountains, and entrancing wind chimes throughout these dream sequences. Every chime emits eerie tones that like the wind's whispers or the past's cries. Rachel continues to find strength and comfort in this otherworldly environment. An unnatural turn is taken by Rachel's journey on a tragic morning right before dawn. Rachel's name echoes through the air, startling her out of sleep, and then a massive chime begins to play a hauntingly beautiful music. The air is filled with ethereal vibrations that are both unsettling and alluring. Rachel wonders whether the spirit world is attempting to connect with her, recognizing her suffering and fortitude. But as the dream progresses, a more sinister force appears, deeply upsetting Rachel. This dark power trembles her bones and throws a deceptive shadow over the brilliant evenings of broken promises. It draws her into its grasp, making her feel exposed and uneasy. She had unspeakable events that left her with severe wounds that would last a lifetime. But Sarah's tale is more than just one of victimization. It also shows how resilient and strong she is on the inside. Sarah had the strength to fight back despite the trauma she had experienced. She would not let Epstein's evil win her over. Drawing on all the remaining power, she started to think of a way out. Sarah took advantage of a chance one fatal day to escape Epstein's hold. She succeeded in leaving the estate and making her way to security. Although it was a triumphant moment, she will always carry the wounds from her struggle with her. Sarah's road towards justice and healing began with her escape. We will discuss her legal struggles and the mental torment she went through in trying to prosecute Epstein and his collaborators in the next part. Watch this space for the stunning conclusion to Sarah Ransom's tale. In contrast, Kiki encountered a comparable circumstance in the latter part of the 1990s. For her, New York City looked to be the ideal location to pursue her goals of becoming a great model, since it is a city that offers hope and opportunities to those who are young and ambitious. She had no idea that her path would take a sinister detour. Kiki, a 19-year-old Texas girl, came to the city full of expectations. She eventually took up residence in a model's flat on Midtown's notorious 42nd Street. Many females, anywhere from 3 to 20 at any given time, lived in this large apartment while they pursued their aspirations in the big metropolis. In this flat, they were defenseless, alone and distant from home. Kiki was familiar with the brutal reality of the modeling business. Beauty had great importance in this competitive society, but it also presented its own set of difficulties. There was a glimmer of optimism amidst the intense competition, the possibility of success and connections that may catapult one into celebrity. Kiki obtained a job as a hostess at a famous coffee shop that hired actors and models in order to make ends meet. Here she met a young, gorgeous blonde recruiter who appeared to have the key to a brighter future. Kiki's attractiveness drew the recruiter in, and he spent no time in approaching her. She recognized promise and a chance to expose Kiki to a man she called her client. She said this man was friends with supermodels and had ties in the fashion sector. It appeared to be a dream realized. Keen to make progress, Kiki considered her alternatives. The recruiter told her it didn't matter that she didn't have any massage experience. The dude just happened to be partial to pretty young girls. Kiki, whose financial circumstances were poor, viewed this as an opportunity for assistance. On the day of the appointment, Kiki arrived at the address the recruiter had given her with trepidation. The maid answered the door with a distant, icy manner. Kiki went up to the second floor with her, following her into an elevator. She entered a realm she could never have imagined when the doors opened. As Kiki entered the room, her uneasiness increased. She had the impression that she was being encircled by walls. And suddenly, a towel-wrapped Jeffrey Epstein came in. She tried not to show her fear, even if his proximity made her shudder. Epstein conversed casually with Kiki, seemingly indifferent to the seriousness of his conduct. Like it was any other day at the workplace, he inquired about her name and her origins. However, Kiki was terrified because she knew what was in store for her. She started massaging Epstein with quivering hands, clearly inexperienced. She feared his wrath and felt as though she was failing. She had no idea, though, that this was only the beginning. He gave Kiki the command to take off her and as time went on, her terror intensified. She obeyed, shivering in fear as her weakness was shown. Kiki remained there, unprotected and defenseless, while Jeffrey Epstein's true motivations became apparent. What had looked like a harmless massage rapidly descended into a terrifying attack. Kiki shivered at the grin on Epstein's face, who seemed to be enjoying his dominance over her. Kiki shuddered, feeling frightened and violated. This was her first encounter, marred by the brutality of a guy who enjoyed inflicting suffering on others. She was aware that she had to decide whether to run, fight, or freeze. Epstein cruelly gave Kiki $200 after the attack, treating it like any other transaction. He walked out of the room, leaving her to deal alone with the shock of what had happened. When the maid came back, she let Kiki go, leaving her to deal with the shock and bewilderment that overcame her. Kiki, her face wet with tears, stretched out to her mother, overwhelmed by the tragedy she had experienced. She begged her mom to come get her out of this nightmare. The atrocities she had encountered had left the once bright and optimistic young woman broken. Kiki was having trouble finding comfort at home. She struggled to accept that she was not the same girl who had left for New York City, and the walls of her childhood home felt oppressive. She attempted to lessen the influence of the recollections of that terrible day on her mind, but they still tormented her. In an attempt to provide closure and promote healing, Kiki's proposed that going back to the location of the trauma would cause certain memories to surface again. Kiki made the decision to face her demons and return to Epstein's estate while standing outside with a mixture of fear and resolve. Kiki could still clearly see Epstein's face in her thoughts, as though he was still hiding behind the mansion's doors. It consistently served as a reminder of the darkness she had experienced. It seemed unsettling, like there was something evil about the home. Kiki was left wondering why the maid, who appeared to know exactly what was about to happen, said nothing. She wondered why someone who might have stopped the cycle by speaking up instead chose to remain silent. It was a menacing query that alluded to Epstein's surroundings' cooperation. In July 2019, Courtney's journey as an Epstein survivor started when her buddy Brad gave her a phone call that would change her life. She had no idea that this conversation would signal the start of a much-needed sea change in her pursuit of justice. Courtney can still clearly recall the exact moment she learned the news. Her phone rang as she was going about her day, strolling down a busy street. It was Brad, and he sounded both excited and shocked. Courtney was initially taken aback and incredulous. Although the news appeared too fantastic to be true, she realized deep down that she had been waiting years for this crucial time. We need to travel back in time in order to comprehend the importance of this arrest. Epstein's terror reign started when Courtney was just 14 years old. He enticed impressionable young females into his network of deceit and he was able to act without consequence for many years due to his affluent lifestyle and powerful social network. Epstein's activities were not without criticism, though. Investigations were conducted into his actions in 2008. Epstein was accused of and trafficking in but he was spared harsh punishment thanks to a contentious plea agreement. Courtney was one of Epstein's victims who felt abandoned and disregarded by the legal system for many years. But fresh evidence surfaced in 2019, rekindling the case against him. Journalists, survivors, and law enforcement persevered until Epstein was eventually taken into custody. This time, the authorities were going to make sure that justice was done. The world watched as Epstein was hauled into jail and, after eluding punishment for so long, faced some sort of accountability. Courtney was reminded of her 14-year-old self by seeing Epstein in court. Both cognitively and emotionally, a tornado of feelings were stirred up by that event. But now that she was in her 30s, Courtney was prepared to take a stand and make sure Epstein never hurt anybody again. During Epstein's bond hearing, Courtney used the opportunity to speak out and spoke the truth. His money and influence didn't scare her away. As her remarks reverberated throughout the courtroom, Epstein was unable to look her in the eye. Courtney reclaimed her authority at that precise time and confronted her. The judge decided not to grant Epstein bail due to the weight of Courtney's evidence and the impactful remarks of other survivors. This was an important step in making sure he was going to pay for what he had done. Courtney and the other survivors felt a range of feelings as Epstein was taken away, including grief, rage, and a renewed sense of faith that justice would be served this time. But Courtney's adventure was far from ended. She was aware that Epstein would have to face the repercussions of his horrible acts as long as survivors persisted in coming forward. One beautiful afternoon in New York City, Amy McClure found herself in the sumptuous environs of Epstein's Manhattan mansion. She was going to give him a massage, but she had no idea what horror was ahead. She had no idea that she was entering a maze of and deception. Amy McClure said she felt foolish, humiliated, and ashamed. Her innocence and trust were further damaged when Epstein responded to her age by telling her that she was too old. The exchange quickly turned from awkward to violent, leaving a deep psychological scar on McClure. McClure remained silent because of fear, embarrassment, and a conviction that justice would never be done. She quickly understood, though, that her tale was only one component of a much bigger picture, a riddle that would ultimately reveal Epstein's horror regime over time. As more victims came forward, the terrible secrets that lay beneath Epstein's money and influence would come to light. Despite being among the first accusations made against Epstein, McClure's story would turn out to be an important missing element. McClure's remarks strike a chord with the many victims who suffered at the hands of Epstein, shattering their hopes and leaving them permanently damaged. Still, McClure's trip did not end with her quiet. She decided to come out of hiding and go after justice. McClure's fortitude and tenacity are demonstrated by her commitment to hold Epstein's collaborators accountable. She joins the other survivors in asking that their voices be heard as she joins the battle for justice.